Mom, they found my father. 5 words. That's all it took to destroy 17 years of protection. Melanie Johnson had done everything right. Changed cities, changed numbers, buried the past so deep her son would never find the billionaire who'd looked at her pregnancy test and said, "This baby would ruin everything." But Joseph didn't ask permission. He applied to a reality show called Find Your Father, forced them to track Kelvin down, and dragged the man who abandoned them into their living room. Now cameras are rolling. A sealed envelope sits on the table, and the name inside? It's about to prove that some men don't deserve to be found. Melanie Johnson never believed life could freeze in a single breath. But it did. It happened on a Thursday evening in March, while she was folding laundry in the living room of the small 2-bedroom apartment she and her son had called home for the past 6 years. Joseph had just gotten home from school. She heard his backpack hit the floor, heard his footsteps, sensed the hesitation in the way he lingered near the doorway instead of heading straight to his room like he usually did. And then he said it. 5 words that shattered 17 years of carefully constructed peace. Mom, they found my father. The sock she'd been folding slipped from her fingers. Her chest tightened. The air in the room turned thin and sharp, like breathing through broken glass. She didn't turn around right away. Couldn't. Because if she looked at him, if she saw the hope in his eyes, she'd have to face the one thing she'd been running from since the day Joseph was born. Kelvin Pinto. The name alone made her stomach twist. What are you talking about? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Joseph stepped closer. She could hear the nervous excitement humming underneath his words. The show, Mom, Find Your Father. I applied a few months ago. I didn't think they'd actually find him, but Melanie spun around. Her son stood there holding his phone, his brown eyes wide and hopeful. His face lit with the kind of innocence that only comes from not knowing how badly the world can hurt you. You did what? Joseph flinched at her tone, but he didn't back down. I sent in my DNA. They have this database. And Mom, they matched me. They found him. Her knees felt weak. She sank onto the arm of the couch, gripping the edge to steady herself. This couldn't be happening. She'd been so careful, so deliberate. She'd moved towns, changed her phone number twice, kept Joseph's last name Johnson instead of Pinto. She did everything she could to make sure Kelvin would never be part of their lives. And now, who is it? She whispered, even though somewhere deep in her bones, she already knew. Joseph's face broke into a smile that gutted her. His name is Kelvin Pinto. Mom, do you know who that is? He's like a billionaire. He's been on magazine covers. He owns one of the biggest tech companies in the country. Melanie closed her eyes. There it was. The name she hadn't spoken out loud in years. The man who'd looked her in the eye 17 years ago and said, I can't do this right now, Mel. The company, the investors, this baby would ruin everything. The man who left her standing in their cramped apartment with a positive pregnancy test and a shattered heart. The man who chose his future over theirs. And what she didn't know yet? This was just the beginning of a story that would force her to confront everything she thought she knew about betrayal, forgiveness, and what it means when the person who destroyed you comes back asking for a second chance. Joseph was still talking, his voice rising with excitement. The producers want to do a reunion episode. They said he agreed to come on the show. Mom, he wants to meet me. Melanie's head snapped up. He what? He said yes. They called him, told him about the DNA match, and he agreed. We're supposed to fly out next week for the taping. Her pulse hammered in her ears. Kelvin agreed, which meant he knew, which meant this was real, which meant the life she'd built, the quiet, safe, Kelvin-free life, was about to implode. Joseph crouched down in front of her, his hands on her knees. Mom, I know you never wanted to talk about him. I know it's complicated. But don't you think I deserve to know where I come from? And there it was. The question she'd been dreading since the day he first asked, why don't I have a dad? She looked into her son's face, the face that was so heartbreakingly similar to Kelvin's, it sometimes hurt to look at him. Same sharp jawline. Same intense brown eyes. Same stubborn hope. Joseph deserved the truth. But the truth was ugly. And she wasn't sure she was strong enough to watch her son's heart break the way hers had. Sweetheart, she started, her voice cracking, there are things you don't understand. Things about your father that A knock at the door interrupted her. Joseph stood. That's probably them. Them? The producers. They wanted to meet with us tonight, to go over the details. Melanie's stomach dropped. Joseph, you invited them here? Without asking me? Guilt flickered across his face. I'm sorry, Mom. I knew if I asked, you'd say no. And I need this. I need to know him. Before she could respond, Joseph was already at the door, opening it, letting in two people, a man in his 40s holding a tablet, and a woman in a sleek blazer carrying a leather portfolio. The woman smiled warmly, too warmly. Mrs. Johnson, I'm Vanessa Cole, executive producer of Find Your Father. This is my associate, Marcus. We're so thrilled to meet you. Melanie stood on shaking legs, arms crossed protectively over her chest. You had no right to contact my son without my permission. Vanessa's smile didn't falter. I completely understand your concern, but J. Joseph is 17, and he reached out to us independently. Legally, we're within our rights. And honestly, she stepped closer, lowering her voice like they were old friends sharing a secret. This could change his life. Kelvin Pinto is one of the most successful men in the country. Your son deserves to know his father. Melanie's jaw tightened. Deserves to know his father. As if Kelvin was some prize, some gift Joseph had been denied. These people had no idea. Marcus pulled an envelope from his bag, cream-colored, sealed with the show's logo. This, he said gently, is the official DNA report. We wanted to present it to you both in person. Melanie stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade. Joseph reached for it, but Vanessa held it just out of reach, her eyes fixed on Melanie. Would you like to do the honors? No. She didn't want to touch it, didn't want to open it, didn't want to confirm what she already knew in her gut. But Joseph was watching her with those wide, hopeful eyes. So she took the envelope. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Clinical. Sterile. Packed with percentages and genetic markers that all pointed to one undeniable conclusion. Alleged father, Kelvin Pinto. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. The paper slipped from her hands and fluttered to the floor. Joseph picked it up, his breath catching as he read the words. It's him, he whispered. It's really him. Melanie's vision blurred. 17 years. 17 years of protecting him from this. And in one reckless decision, Joseph had torn it all down. But here's what nobody in that room understood yet. This wasn't just about a reunion. This was about whether people who break you can ever truly become safe again. And for Melanie, that question had kept her up at night for nearly 2 decades. Vanessa was talking again, something about filming schedules and travel arrangements and life-changing television, but Melanie barely heard her. All she could think about was the last time she'd seen Kelvin. The way he'd looked at her, not with love, but with inconvenience. The way he'd said, I'll send you money, just handle it. Handle it. Like their child was a problem to be solved, a mess to be cleaned up. She'd walked out that night and never looked back. And now she was going to have to face him again. Not as the young, heartbroken woman who'd loved him, but as the mother who'd raised the son he never wanted. Joseph touched her arm gently. Mom, are you okay? She wasn't. But she looked at her boy, her smart, kind, hopeful boy, and forced herself to nod. When is the taping? Vanessa's eyes lit up. Next Friday. We'll fly you both to Los Angeles. Put you up in a hotel. Cover all expenses. And Melanie? Her voice softened. I know this is overwhelming, but trust me, this story, it's going to resonate with millions of people. Melanie didn't care about millions of people. She cared about the one person standing in front of her, holding a DNA report like it was a treasure map to the life he'd always wondered about. And the man on the other end of that map, the one who destroyed her, he was about to learn that the life he walked away from didn't just disappear. It grew. It thrived. And it was coming for him whether he was ready or not. What Joseph didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 17 years ago, Melanie had tried to tell Kelvin one more time. She'd sent a message, left a voicemail, begged him to reconsider. He never responded. And she'd spent nearly 2 decades believing he simply didn't care. But what if she was wrong? What if there was more to the story than she knew? The answers were waiting in Los Angeles, and they were going to change everything. That night, Melanie couldn't sleep. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of Joseph's breathing from the room next door. The producers had left hours ago. Joseph had gone to bed excited, hopeful, already imagining a relationship with a father he'd never met. And Melanie? She was 17 years in the past, reliving the worst mistake of her life, loving Kelvin Pinto. The memory came whether she wanted it or not, sharp and vivid, like opening a door she'd locked and bolted years ago. 19 years earlier, Melanie had met Kelvin at a coffee shop near campus. She was 23, in her final year of nursing school, running on 4 hours of sleep and too much caffeine. He was 25, hunched over a laptop in the corner booth, lines of code reflected in his glasses, 3 empty espresso cups stacked beside him. She'd accidentally bumped his table on her way out. His coffee spilled. She apologized profusely, grabbed napkins, tried to clean up the mess, while he stared at her with those intense brown eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "It's fine," he'd said, but he didn't look annoyed. He looked intrigued. "Let me buy you another one," she'd insisted. He'd smiled then, a real smile. "Only if you stay and drink it with me." She should have said no. She had an exam the next morning, clinicals in 6 hours, a study group waiting for her. But something about the way he looked at her, like she was the most interesting thing in the room, made her sit down. They talked for 3 hours. He told her about the app he was building. Something about data security and encryption that went over her head, but the way his face lit up when he explained it, that didn't. She told him about nursing school, about her dream of working in pediatrics, about her mother, Norma, who'd raised her alone after her father walked out, and how she wanted to be the kind of person who stayed. "I like that," Kelvin had said softly. "Someone who stays." But here's what she didn't know then. What she couldn't have known: Kelvin Pinto didn't stay for anyone. Their relationship moved fast. Too fast, maybe. Within 2 months, they'd moved in together. A cramped studio apartment with broken heating and a landlord who never fixed anything. But it was theirs. Kelvin worked obsessively 16-hour days, pitching to investors, rewriting code until dawn. Melanie would come home from 12-hour shifts at the hospital exhausted, and he'd still be at that laptop, face illuminated by blue light. But when he looked up and saw her, everything else disappeared. He'd pull her onto his lap, bury his face in her neck, and whisper, "You're the only thing keeping me sane." She believed him. She believed in him. She believed in the future he kept describing, the one where his company took off, where they'd buy a house, have kids, build the kind of life neither of them had growing up. "We're going to make it, Mel," he'd say. "I promise you, we're going to make it." And God, she'd wanted that so badly. Then came the night that changed everything. Melanie had been feeling off for weeks, exhausted beyond what her shifts could explain, nauseous in the mornings, emotional in ways that didn't make sense. She'd taken the test in the bathroom of the hospital during her break. 2 pink lines. Her hands shook so hard, she nearly dropped it. Pregnant. She was pregnant. And the strangest thing happened in that moment. She wasn't scared. She was hopeful. Because despite the bad timing, despite the tiny apartment and her student loans and Kelvin's startup stress, she could suddenly see it. A baby. Their baby. A family. She'd gone home that night with the test in her bag, heart pounding, planning how to tell him. She found him pacing the apartment, phone pressed to his ear, voice tight with stress. "No, you don't understand. If we don't close this funding round, we're done. The whole company collapses." He hung up, ran his hands through his hair, looked at her with wild, desperate eyes. "The investors are pulling out. They heard a rumor that I'm unstable, that I'm not focused. Melanie, if I don't fix this in the next 2 weeks, everything I've built is gone." She should have waited, should have picked a better moment. But the words came out anyway. "Kelvin, I'm pregnant." The look on his face, she'd never forget it. Not joy, not fear. Calculation. Cold, brutal calculation. He stepped back like she'd struck him. "What?" "I'm pregnant. About 6 weeks, I think." Silence. A silence so heavy it crushed the air from the room. Then he started pacing again. Faster this time. "Mel, this can't happen right now." Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean the timing. It's impossible. The investors, the funding, everything is hanging by a thread. If they find out about this..." If they think I'm about to have personal complications. Personal complications? Her voice broke. Kelvin, this is our child. I know that. He spun toward her, and for the first time, she saw something that terrified her. He wasn't looking at her like a partner. He was looking at her like a problem. But you have to understand, this company is everything I've worked for. If it goes under, we have nothing. No future, no stability, nothing. We'd have each other. He shook his head. That's not enough. And there it was. The truth she'd been too in love to see. She wasn't enough. Their baby wasn't enough. His dream, his empire, his legacy, that was what mattered. I'll send you money, he said, voice flat now. Distant. Whatever you need. But Mel, I can't do this. Not now. Maybe when things settle, when the company is stable, we can revisit. Revisit? She laughed, bitter and broken. You want me to wait to see if you're ready to be a father? I'm asking you to understand. Get out. He blinked. What? Get out. Her voice was steady now, cold as stone. I'm not asking you to choose between your company and this baby. I'm telling you, you already did. Kelvin stared at her for a long moment. And then, without another word, he grabbed his jacket and walked out the door. She waited 3 days for him to come back. He never did. Now, if you've ever loved someone who chose everything else over you, you know that kind of pain doesn't just fade. It roots itself deep and changes how you see the world. Melanie spent years wondering if she was the problem, if maybe she asked for too much, expected too much, loved too hard. But here's what she learned. What took her years to understand. Sometimes the people who leave teach us more about our strength than the ones who stay. And if that resonates with you, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after someone walked away, I hope you'll subscribe. Because this story, it's about what happens when the person who broke you comes back, and whether second chances are ever truly possible. Let's walk through this together. Melanie moved in with her mother Norma the following week. Norma was a steel-spined woman who didn't believe in second chances for men who failed the first time. When Melanie showed up with 2 suitcases and red-rimmed eyes, Norma asked one question. Did he hurt you? No. Did he abandon you? Melanie's silence was answer enough. Norma's jaw tightened. Then he's dead to us. Raising Joseph alone was the hardest thing Melanie had ever done. There were nights she cried so hard she thought she'd shatter. Nights when Joseph wouldn't stop screaming and she was so tired she could barely stand. Nights when she wondered if Kelvin was right, if she'd made a mistake keeping the baby. But then Joseph would look at her with those big brown eyes and wrap his tiny fingers around hers, and she'd remember this was her choice, her life, her son. Kelvin didn't get to take that from her. And Kelvin? He became exactly what he'd sacrificed everything for. 2 years after he left, Melanie saw his face on a magazine cover at the grocery store checkout. Tech's New Titan. How Kelvin Pinto built a billion-dollar empire. Her hands trembled as she stared at his photo, older, sharper, more confident. Standing in front of a glass tower, with his arms crossed, smiling like a man who'd conquered the world. And maybe he had, but he'd done it alone. She didn't buy the magazine, didn't need to. Over the years, Kelvin's face showed up everywhere, interviews, conferences, awards. Each time, her heart hardened a little more. He'd chosen this. Chosen success over family. Chosen himself over them. And now, after 17 years of silence, he wanted to waltz back into their lives because a TV show told him he had a son? No, she wouldn't allow it. Melanie's phone buzzed on the nightstand, dragging her out of the memory. 2:47 a.m. Who would be calling at this hour? She grabbed the phone. Mom. Her stomach tightened. Norma never called in the middle of the night unless something was wrong. She answered, Mom? Norma's voice was sharp, urgent, stripped of its usual composure. Melanie, tell me you didn't agree to that television show. Melanie sat up. How did you? Tell me you didn't. Joseph wants to meet him, Mom. I can't just. Yes, you can. Norma's voice cracked, something Melanie had only heard twice in her life. You can't let that man near Joseph. You don't know what he's capable of. Melanie's blood went cold. What are you talking about? Silence. Then, quietly. There are things I never told you, Melanie. Things I did to protect you. But if Kelvin Pinto is coming back into your life, you need to know the truth. What truth? Another pause. Longer this time. He came looking for you. 3 years after he left, and I made sure he never found you." The room tilted. What? And somewhere across the country, in a penthouse overlooking the Los Angeles skyline, Kelvin Pinto stared at a photo on his phone. A 17-year-old boy with his eyes, his jawline, his face, the son he never knew existed. And for the first time in 17 years, Kelvin Pinto felt something his empire couldn't give him: regret. Melanie didn't sleep the rest of that night. She sat at her kitchen table until dawn, phone in hand, replaying her mother's words over and over. "He came looking for you, 3 years after he left, and I made sure he never found you." Norma had refused to say more over the phone, only, "We'll talk when you get back. But Melanie, be careful. Men like Kelvin Pinto don't just walk away from billion-dollar empires, and they don't just walk back into lives they destroyed without a reason." What reason could there possibly be? 17 years of silence didn't erase itself with a television appearance. But Joseph didn't know any of that. Joseph woke up Friday morning like it was Christmas, bright-eyed, nervous, talking non-stop during the entire flight to Los Angeles about what he'd say, what questions he'd ask, whether Kelvin would like him. Melanie smiled and nodded in all the right places. Inside, she was screaming. The studio was massive. Bright lights, cameras on robotic arms, rows of audience seats, arranged in a semicircle around a stage designed to look warm and intimate, cream-colored couches, soft lighting, a backdrop with the show's logo glowing in gold letters. It felt like a trap disguised as a living room. A production assistant with a headset and a clipboard led them backstage. "Joseph, you'll wait here until we call you. Melanie, you'll be seated in the family section, stage left. We'll mic you both up in just a moment." Joseph was practically vibrating with anticipation. Melanie felt like she might throw up. Another assistant clipped a tiny microphone to her collar. "Try to stay natural. Don't worry about the cameras, just focus on the moment. Focus on the moment." The moment she'd spent 17 years avoiding. She was led to her seat front row, directly in the audience's line of sight. Around her, people chatted excitedly, phones out, ready to witness what the pre-show host had called one of the most shocking reunions in Find Your Father history. Melanie's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Then, the lights dimmed. Music swelled, dramatic, emotional, designed to pull heartstrings. The host walked onto the stage, a polished woman in her 40s named Diane Mercer, known for her warm smile and her ability to make people cry on national television. "Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Find Your Father." The audience applauded. "Tonight, we have a story that proves truth really is stranger than fiction. A 17-year-old boy searching for the father he never met, and a DNA match that led us to one of the most powerful men in America." Melanie's pulse hammered in her ears. Diane continued, her voice dropping into that practiced tone of intimacy. "Please welcome to the stage, Joseph Johnson." The audience erupted as Joseph walked out, looking so young and vulnerable under those lights. He waved shyly, sat down on the couch, and Diane took the seat across from him. "Joseph, thank you for being here. Tell us, why did you decide to find your father?" Joseph's voice was steady, but Melanie could see his hands trembling. I always felt like something was missing. You know? Like half of my story was blank. And I love my mom, she's amazing, but I needed to know where I came from." Diane nodded sympathetically. "And your mother is here tonight. Melanie, would you stand for us?" Every camera swung toward her. Melanie stood on legs that felt like water, forced a smile, sat back down as applause washed over her. She felt naked, exposed. Diane turned back to Joseph. "What do you hope happens tonight?" Joseph's eyes glistened. "I just want to meet him. I want to know if he's proud of me." The audience made soft sounds of sympathy. Melanie's throat tightened. "Proud of you," she thought bitterly. "He doesn't even know you exist. Or did he?" Norma's voice echoed in her mind. "He came looking for you." Diane stood, her expression shifting into something more dramatic. "Well, Joseph, the moment you've been waiting for is finally here. Your father agreed to take a DNA test. And the results?" She held up a gold envelope. "Are conclusive." The audience leaned forward collectively. "Joseph, are you ready to meet your biological father?" Joseph nodded, unable to speak. Diane's smile widened. "Then please join me in welcoming tech billionaire and CEO of Apex Innovations, Kelvin Pinto." The audience exploded. And then, he walked out. Melanie's breath stopped. 17 years. She hadn't seen him in 17 years. But the moment Kelvin stepped onto that stage, every memory came roaring back with brutal clarity. He looked different, older, sharper, more polished. His hair was cut perfectly. His suit probably cost more than her car. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent years commanding boardrooms and giving TED Talks. But his eyes, those eyes, were the same. Dark, intense, and right now, scanning the audience like he was looking for something. Looking for her. Their eyes met. And Kelvin Pinto, the man who never stumbled, never hesitated, froze mid-step. His composed expression cracked. Just for a second. But Melanie saw it. The shock. The recognition. The something else she couldn't quite name. He recovered quickly, turning his attention to Joseph, but his hands were shaking as he reached out. Joseph stood, and the audience gasped. Because side by side, there was no denying it. Same height, same build, same intense brown eyes, and strong jawline. They looked like a photograph, taken 17 years apart, the boy and the man he'd become. Diane's voice was thick with emotion. I think we can all see the resemblance. Kelvin stared at Joseph like he was seeing a ghost. Hi, Joseph said, voice cracking. His eyes were wet. I'm Joseph. Kelvin's throat worked. Hi, Joseph. They stood there, neither knowing what to do, until Diane gestured for them to sit. Kelvin sat stiffly, his polished CEO persona flickering like a bad connection. Diane held up the gold envelope again. Kelvin, as you know, we conducted a DNA test using the sample you provided. Are you ready to hear the results? Kelvin nodded, but his eyes kept drifting to Melanie. Diane opened the envelope with theatrical slowness. According to the genetic analysis conducted by our certified laboratory, Kelvin Pinto, you are the biological father of Joseph Johnson. The probability of paternity is 99.98%. The audience erupted again, gasps, applause, a few sobs. Joseph's face broke into a tearful smile. Kelvin looked like he'd been struck by lightning. His voice came out rough, unsteady. He cleared his throat. Tried again. I didn't know. I swear. I didn't know. Diane leaned forward. You're saying Melanie never told you she was pregnant? And now, every eye in the building turned to Melanie. Her jaw tightened. Don't you dare, she thought. Don't you dare rewrite history. Kelvin's eyes found hers across the stage. Melanie and we were together a long time ago. But we lost touch. I never. His voice cracked. I never received any message. Any call, if I had known. Liar, Melanie whispered. The microphone caught it. The entire audience heard. Diane's eyes widened. Melanie, would you like to respond? Melanie stood before she could talk herself out of it. She walked onto that stage with 17 years of suppressed rage burning in her chest. And when she stood in front of Kelvin Pinto, she saw him for exactly what he was. Not a billionaire. Not a CEO. Just a man who ran when things got hard. You told me, she said quietly, voice shaking, that the baby was bad timing. That your investors would pull out, that you'd fix it later. So don't stand here and act like you didn't know. Kelvin stood too, and for the first time, his mask fully shattered. Mel, don't call me that. The audience was dead silent. Kelvin's hands clenched at his sides. I know what I said that night. I know I failed you, but I swear on everything I have, I never got a message after that. I thought you left me. Melanie laughed bitterly. I left you? You moved. Changed your number. When I finally tried to find you, your mother. My mother protected me. From you. Joseph stood suddenly, voice breaking. Stop, please. Both of you. Just stop. They both turned to him. Their son, standing between them with tears streaming down his face. I just wanted to meet my dad, Joseph whispered. That's all I wanted. The pain in his voice broke something in Melanie. She reached for him, but Joseph stepped back. I need a minute, he said, and walked off stage. The producers called a break. Melanie found Joseph in the green room, sitting with his head in his hands. She sat beside him, said nothing, just put her arm around his shoulders. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't mean to make everything worse. You didn't, baby. None of this is your fault. But you and him have a very complicated history. one you shouldn't have to carry. They sat in silence until a production assistant knocked gently. We're ready to resume whenever you are. Joseph looked at his mother. Do you want to leave? She should say yes, should grab her son and run like she did 17 years ago. But Joseph was looking at her with those hopeful eyes, and despite everything, he still wanted this. It's your choice, she said softly. Joseph thought for a moment, then nodded. I want to finish this. When they returned to the stage, Kelvin was standing near the back, hands in his pockets, looking more vulnerable than Melanie had ever seen him. The show wrapped quickly after that. Diane asked a few more questions. Joseph and Kelvin exchanged phone numbers. The audience gave them a standing ovation. And through it all, Melanie felt Kelvin's eyes on her. As the credits rolled and the audience filed out, Kelvin approached her. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his temples, the weight of years that matched her own. Melanie, his voice was low, meant only for her. Can we talk? Alone? There's nothing to, please. That single word, spoken without ego or pretense, stopped her. 5 minutes, she said. He nodded. That's all I'm asking. And somewhere in the audience, a woman with a camera phone smiled. Because the footage she just captured, the raw, unscripted confrontation between Melanie Johnson and Kelvin Pinto was about to go viral. And the life Melanie worked so hard to keep private? It was about to become everyone's business. The private room the producers gave them was too small for the weight of 17 years. Melanie stood with her arms crossed, back against the wall, as far from Kelvin as the space allowed. He stood near the door, hands shoved in his pockets, looking at her like he was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. 5 minutes, she reminded him. Talk. Kelvin exhaled slowly. I know you don't believe me. But Melanie, I need you to hear this. I never got a message about the pregnancy. Not a call, not a text, not a voicemail. Nothing. She wanted to laugh in his face, wanted to walk out, but something in his voice, something raw and unpolished, made her hesitate. I called you, she said coldly. 4 times over that first week, left 2 voicemails. You ignored every single one. What number did you call? Your cell. The one you'd had since we met. Kelvin's face changed. I changed that number 3 days after I left. The investors, they were calling non-stop, threatening to pull funding. My lawyer told me to get a new line, keep business separate. His voice dropped. If you called during that first week, those messages went to a number I'd already disconnected. The investors, they were calling non-stop, threatening to pull funding. My lawyer told me to get a new line, keep business separate. He stepped closer. If you called the old number, the floor tilted slightly beneath her. No. She wasn't going to let him rewrite history with a convenient excuse. You knew where I lived. You could have come back. I tried, his voice cracked. 3 years later, after the company stabilized, I went back to that apartment. You were gone. The landlord said, you moved out the week after I left. No forwarding address. Melanie's throat tightened. She had moved. Straight to her mother's house 2 hours away, erasing every trace of the life she'd built with him. I hired someone to find you, Kelvin continued. A private investigator. It took him 6 months. But he tracked you to your mother's address. I drove there myself. Knocked on the door. Melanie's pulse stuttered. What? Your mother answered. I told her who I was. Asked if you still lived there. Asked if I could see you. He paused. She told me you'd moved to Seattle. That you wanted nothing to do with me. That if I cared about you at all, I'd leave you alone. The room spun. She told you I moved? She said you were building a new life, that seeing me would destroy you. Kelvin's eyes glistened, so I left. I thought I was doing what you wanted. Melanie pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. Norma lied. Her mother, the woman who'd held her through every breakdown, who'd raised Joseph alongside her, had lied to both of them. Why are you telling me this now? Because I need you to understand, I didn't abandon Joseph. I didn't know he existed. And if I had known, his voice broke completely. Melanie, I would have come back. Company or no company. Investors or no investors. I would have come back. She wanted to believe him. God, some broken part of her, wanted to believe him so badly. But 17 years of anger didn't evaporate because of one conversation. Before she could respond, someone knocked urgently on the door. Vanessa, the producer, stuck her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Joseph is asking for you both. They found Joseph in the green room, laptop open, face pale. Mom, he whispered, I need to tell you something. Melanie sat beside him. Kelvin hung back near the doorway, uncertain of his place. Joseph's hands trembled over the keyboard. I didn't just apply to the show. I hacked their system. Melanie blinked. What? The application, they have this algorithm that matches DNA samples to potential fathers in public databases. But it only works if the father is already in the system. And Kelvin wasn't. Joseph's voice cracked. So I wrote a program. I scraped data from interviews, public records, anything I could find about successful tech CEOs around the right age. I built a profile and backdoored it into their system so they'd flag him as a match and reach out. The room went silent. Melanie couldn't find words. Joseph, that's illegal. I know. Tears spilled down his cheeks. I just wanted answers. I spent my whole life wondering who my father was, and you wouldn't tell me. So I found him myself. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Kelvin moved closer, his CEO mask completely gone. Joseph, look at me. Joseph turned, terrified. That's some of the most impressive coding I've ever heard of, Kelvin said softly. Morally questionable? Absolutely. But impressive. Despite everything, Joseph's lips twitched toward a smile. But Melanie's mind was reeling. Joseph had orchestrated all of this. The show, the reunion, the entire confrontation. And Kelvin never received her calls. And Norma lied to protect her. What else was built on foundations of lies? You know what's interesting about families? We spend so much energy protecting each other that sometimes the protection becomes its own kind of harm. Norma thought she was keeping Melanie safe. Joseph thought he was finding answers. Kelvin thought he was respecting Melanie's wishes. And every single one of them was operating on incomplete information. Maybe you've been there, stuck between love and lies, between what you know and what you were never told. If this feels familiar, drop a comment and let me know. And if you want to see how tangled webs like this finally get untangled, hit that like button, because this story is about to get even more complicated. Melanie waited until they were back at the hotel to call her mother. It was past midnight, but Norma answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting. He told you, Norma said. Not a question. You lied to me. Melanie's voice shook. He came looking for me. He wanted to fix things. And you told him I moved to Seattle. Silence. Mom, why? Because I knew what would happen, Norma said fiercely. He'd show up with apologies and promises, and you'd believe him. You'd take him back, and then what? He'd leave again the next time his company needed him, the next time something more important came along. That wasn't your choice to make. You're my daughter. Joseph is my grandson. I would burn the world down before I let another man destroy you. Norma's voice cracked. I watched your father do it to me. I wasn't going to watch Kelvin Pinto do it to you. Melanie sank onto the hotel bed, tears streaming. You kept his father from him. For 17 years. I kept you safe. You kept me alone. The line went quiet, except for Norma's ragged breathing. I did what I thought was right, Norma whispered. Maybe I was wrong. But Melanie, don't let him fool you. Men like Kelvin Pinto don't change. They just get better at pretending. The call ended. Melanie sat in the dark, feeling like the ground beneath her had turned to quicksand. The next morning, Vanessa called with news that made Melanie's stomach drop. I need you to see something, the producer said grimly. She sent a video file. Melanie opened it. Hidden camera footage. Black and white. Dated 3 days before the taping. Norma, sitting across from Vanessa in what looked like a preliminary interview. Vanessa's voice. Mrs. Williams, as Joseph's grandmother, how do you feel about this reunion? Norma, I think you're making a mistake. Kelvin Pinto is dangerous. Vanessa, dangerous how? Norma, not physically, but emotionally? He destroyed my daughter once. Walked away when she needed him most. Now, you're handing him access to her again. And to my grandson. That man cares about one thing himself. And when this stops being good for his image, he'll disappear. And Joseph will be the one who suffers. The video ended. Melanie stared at the screen. Her mother had warned them. And the producers aired the reunion anyway, because it made good television. Rage and guilt warred in her chest. Because Norma was trying to protect them. But Norma had also lied. And now Melanie didn't know who to trust. Then the paparazzi found them. It started with one photographer outside the hotel. By noon, there were 12. By the time Melanie and Joseph tried to leave for the airport, they couldn't get through the lobby without cameras flashing, voices shouting questions. Joseph, how does it feel to be a billionaire's son? Melanie, did you hide the pregnancy for money? Is Kelvin Pinto paying child support? Hotel security had to escort them to a back exit. Joseph's hands shook the entire car ride. Mom, why are they acting like we did something wrong? Because the story was already out of their control. By the time they landed back home, Joseph's school was swarming with reporters. The principal called, Mrs. Johnson, for Joseph's safety, we think he should stay home for a few days, until this dies down. It didn't die down. Someone leaked Joseph's full name, his school, their address. Melanie found reporters camped outside their apartment building. And then Kelvin called. I'm handling this, he said without preamble. My PR team is drafting a statement. We'll control the narrative, limit exposure, protect Joseph's privacy. No, the word came out sharper than she intended. Melanie, I have resources. I can make this go away. You mean you can spin it? Make yourself look good, the reformed billionaire embracing his secret son. Her voice dripped with bitterness. This isn't about protecting Joseph. This is about protecting your image. That's not fair. You want to help? Stop talking to the press. Stop sending your team. Stop trying to manage us like we're a PR crisis. I'm trying to do the right thing. The right thing would have been coming back 17 years ago. She hung up before he could respond. But her hands were shaking, because she knew deep down that maybe he would have come back. If he'd known. If Norma hadn't lied. If the voicemails had reached him. Too many ifs, built on too many secrets. That night, Joseph showed her his phone. A tabloid headline glared from the screen. Billionaire's secret son exposed. Joseph Marcus Johnson, 16, of West Valley High School. Below it, their home address, his photo, her photo, everything. Joseph's face was pale. Mom, they know where we live. They know everything. Melanie pulled him close, her heart hammering with protective fury. She'd spent 17 years keeping him safe, building a quiet life, staying invisible. And now the whole world was watching. And somewhere in a Los Angeles penthouse, Kelvin Pinto was watching too. Her phone buzzed, an unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. And the continue voice on the other end sent chills down her spine. Miss Johnson, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the LAPD. We received a call about your son being in danger. He's right here with me, Melanie said, gripping Joseph tighter. Who called you? Unknown number. Given your recent media exposure, we believe it was a false report. But ma'am, you should consider additional security. The call ended. Someone had called in a fake police report about her son. This wasn't just media attention anymore. This was harassment. And it was only getting worse. Monday morning, Melanie drove Joseph to school, hoping the weekend had cooled things down. She was wrong. The moment Joseph stepped out of the car, phones appeared like weapons. Students he'd known for years suddenly treated him like a celebrity or a circus act. They filmed him walking down the hallway, shouted questions, asked for selfies. One girl actually asked if his dad could get her an internship. Joseph kept his head down, shoulders hunched, trying to disappear. But you can't disappear when you're the only story everyone wants to talk about. In third period, his history teacher had to stop class twice because students wouldn't stop whispering and pointing. By lunch, someone had created an Instagram account called Billionaire Baby Watch, posting photos of Joseph at school without his consent. Melanie got the call from the vice principal at 1:47 p.m. Mrs. Johnson, there are reporters in the parking lot. They're approaching students, asking about Joseph. We've called the police, but I think it's best if you come get him. She found Joseph in the principal's office, staring at his hands, silent. Somewhere between that morning and now, something inside him had shut down. The car ride home was quiet, except for the sound of camera shutters when they pulled into their apartment complex. A reporter shouted, "Joseph, how much money has your father given you?" Joseph flinched like he'd been struck. That night, he barely touched his dinner, barely spoke, just sat in his room with the door closed, drowning in the noise of a world that suddenly wanted a piece of him. Melanie stood outside his door, helpless. She'd protected him from so much. But she couldn't protect him from this. Kelvin called Tuesday morning. "I'm sending a security team," he said without preamble. "2 officers, one for Joseph, one for you. They'll handle the press, keep distance, make sure you're safe. We don't need Melanie. There are photographers camped outside your building. Joseph can't go to school without being mobbed. This isn't a request. You don't get to make decisions for us." "I'm not making decisions. I'm offering help. There's a difference." She wanted to say no, wanted to keep Kelvin and his resources and his guilt-driven assistants out of their lives. But she looked at Joseph's closed bedroom door and heard her own fear screaming louder than her pride. "Fine, but they stay outside. They don't come into our home." "Agreed." There was a pause. "Melanie, I'm also willing to arrange private tutoring for Joseph, or enrollment in a private school where security is tighter and students sign NDAs, whatever he needs. What he needs is for his life to go back to normal." "That's not going to happen." Kelvin's voice was gentle but firm. "Not for a while. So we adapt. We protect him. We give him options. We." As if they were a team. As if 17 years apart could be erased with security guards and private schools. "I'll think about it," she said, and hung up before he could say more. The security team arrived by Wednesday. 2 professionals who looked like they could stop a tank. They stationed themselves outside the building, and for the first time in days, the reporters backed off. Joseph noticed. Did Dad send them?" he asked quietly. Melanie nodded. Something flickered in Joseph's expression. Not quite a smile, but not the deadness that had taken root either. That was nice of him. Nice. Kelvin Pinto was trying to buy his way into their lives with bodyguards and school options and billion-dollar guilt. But Joseph didn't see it that way. Joseph just saw a father trying. And that terrified her more than the paparazzi ever could. Thursday morning, Kelvin was supposed to be in Tokyo. A merger with a Japanese tech conglomerate worth $3.2 billion. 18 months of negotiations. The signing ceremony was scheduled for 9 a.m. Tokyo time, a meeting he absolutely could not miss. His assistant reminded him 3 times. His board members sent increasingly urgent emails. His lawyer called personally. "Kelvin, if you don't show up, this deal collapses. 18 months of work, billions of dollars. You cannot miss this." But at 6 a.m., 2 hours before his flight, Kelvin saw the news alert. A video had gone viral. Joseph, walking to his car, surrounded by reporters, shouting invasive questions. One of them shoved a microphone too close. Joseph flinched, stumbled backward, eyes wide with panic. The security guard stepped in, but the damage was done. The kid looked terrified. Kelvin watched the 10-second clip 4 times. Then he called his assistant. "Cancel Tokyo." "Sir, you can't." I said, "Cancel it. Reschedule. Apologize. Do whatever you need to do. I'm not leaving the country while my son is under siege." "Kelvin, this will cost the company." "I don't care." His voice was steel. "Family first. Figure it out." He hung up, stared at Joseph's face, frozen on his phone screen. And for the first time in his entire career, Kelvin Pinto chose a person over profit. The media found out about the canceled merger within hours. Headlines exploded. Kelvin Pinto backs out of $3 billion deal. Billionaire CEO chooses secret son over business empire. Is fatherhood destroying Kelvin Pinto's company? His board called an emergency meeting. His investors demanded explanations. His stock price dropped 4% in a single afternoon. Kelvin ignored all of it. Instead, he drove to Melanie's apartment. The security guards let him through. Melanie answered the door with exhaustion carved into every line of her face. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to check on Joseph, and you." She almost slammed the door, almost told him to leave. But then Joseph appeared behind her. "Dad?" The word still sounded strange, uncertain, but real. Kelvin's throat tightened. "Hey, I saw the video. I wanted to make sure you were okay. You canceled your trip. It wasn't a question." "Yeah. But that was a huge deal, right? Everyone's talking about it." Kelvin stepped closer. "Joseph, listen to me. No deal, no amount of money is more important than making sure you're safe." "Nothing." Joseph's eyes glistened, and Melanie felt something crack inside her chest. Because this wasn't the Kelvin she remembered. The Kelvin who left wouldn't have sacrificed a billion-dollar merger for anyone. But this Kelvin looked at their son like he was the only thing that mattered. Friday afternoon, Joseph went to therapy. A trauma counselor Kelvin had arranged who specialized in sudden onset fame and media pressure. The viral photo from the park had done something unexpected. It humanized Kelvin Pinto. Comments flooded social media. "This is what real fatherhood looks like. He's kneeling in the mud for his son. Maybe people can change." The board stopped calling with complaints. His stock price stabilized, and for the first time, the media narrative shifted from scandal to redemption. But Kelvin didn't care about any of that. He cared that Joseph had agreed to see him again. Melanie had resisted at first, but Joseph agreed to try it. She waited in the parking lot, staring at her phone, watching the world dissect her life in real time. Comment threads debating whether she was a gold digger. Conspiracy theories about why she hid the pregnancy. Strangers arguing about her parenting, her choices, her worth. She closed the app before she started screaming. An hour later, Joseph emerged, looking drained but calmer. "How was it?" "Weird, but helpful, I think." They drove home in silence. Melanie made dinner. Joseph did homework. The security guards changed shifts outside. Everything seemed almost normal. Until Joseph's phone buzzed at 9 p.m. He looked at the screen. His face went white. "Joseph?" He stood abruptly. "I need some air." "Honey, it's late. I just need to walk. Please. Just 20 minutes. Melanie hesitated. But the security guard was outside. The building was safe. And Joseph looked like he'd shatter if she said no. "Okay, 20 minutes. Text me every 5. He nodded and walked out. Joseph grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. But he didn't go through the main entrance where the security guard was posted. Instead, he slipped down the back stairwell, the one that led to the parking garage. He'd used it 100 times to avoid awkward neighbor conversations. Tonight, it would help him disappear. She got the first text at 9:07, "I'm okay." The second at 9:12, "Still walking." Then nothing. 9:17, no text. 9:22, no text. 9:27, Melanie called him. Straight to voicemail. Her heart started hammering. She called the security guard. "Did Joseph come back inside?" "No, ma'am. He walked toward the park about 15 minutes ago." "Should I go check?" "Yes. Now?" She pulled on shoes, grabbed her keys, ran outside. The park was 6 blocks away. Empty. The security guard found Joseph's phone on a bench. Screen dark, powered off. But Joseph? Gone. Melanie called everyone. Kelvin, the police, Joseph's friends, the school. No one had seen him. She drove through the neighborhood until 2 a.m., searching every corner, every place he might go. Nothing. At 3:14 a.m., her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. But she knew immediately it was him. "Mom, I'm okay. I just need to think. I need space to figure out who I am. Without cameras and reporters, and everyone watching. Please don't come looking. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I love you. I'm sorry." Melanie's hands shook so hard she nearly dropped the phone. She tried to call the number. It rang once, then disconnected. A burner phone, probably. Joseph had planned this. Her 17-year-old son, overwhelmed, exhausted, suffocated by the spotlight, had disappeared into the night. And she had no idea where he was, or if he was truly safe, or when she'd see him again. At 3:47 a.m., Kelvin Pinto's phone rang. He answered on the first ring. "Melanie?" And the sound of her sobbing told him everything. "He's gone, Kelvin. Joseph's gone, and I don't know how to find him." Kelvin stood in Melanie's living room at 4 a.m., staring at the text message on her phone. "I need space to figure out who I am." His mind raced through possibilities. Joseph's friends, the school, hotels. But a 17-year-old kid with no credit card and limited cash couldn't have gone far. Unless he didn't want to be found. Melanie paced like a caged animal. Phone pressed to her ear, leaving another voicemail for Joseph that would never be answered. Her voice cracked. "Baby, please. Just tell me you're safe. That's all I need. Please." Kelvin read the message again. "Space to figure out who I am." And then it hit him. A memory. Razor sharp and 17 years old. Melanie standing in front of him in that cramped apartment, pregnancy test in hand, saying, "I told you at the park, remember? I tried to tell you the week before, but you were so stressed about the pitch meeting. So I asked you to meet me at Riverside Park, the swings, where we had our first real conversation about the future." He'd forgotten that detail, or buried it. But Joseph wouldn't have known about that park unless… "Melanie," his voice cut through her panic. "Where did you tell me you were pregnant? The first time you tried?" She stopped pacing, confusion flickering across her tear-stained face. "What? Before the night I left, you said you tried to tell me somewhere else. Where?" Understanding dawned in her eyes. Riverside Park, about 3 miles from our old apartment. But Kelvin, that was 17 years ago. Joseph doesn't even know that place exists. What if he does? Kelvin was already moving toward the door. What if you mentioned it once? Or he found old photos? Kids are smart, especially when they're looking for answers about where they came from. Melanie grabbed her keys. "Then let's go." The rain started as they drove. Not a drizzle, a downpour that turned the windshield into a waterfall and made the streetlights blur into halos of gold. Kelvin drove in tense silence, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, while Melanie called Joseph's number over and over, each voicemail going straight to that automated message. The park appeared through the rain like a ghost of their past. Empty playground, rusted swings swaying slightly in the wind, the same cracked basketball court where Kelvin used to shoot hoops when he needed to think. Everything smaller than he remembered. Everything haunted. And there, on the swings, barely visible through the rain, a figure, hunched forward, soaking wet. "Joseph." Melanie gasped. "Oh my God." Kelvin parked, and they both ran. But when Joseph looked up and saw them approaching, something in his face made Kelvin slow. "Let me," Kelvin said quietly. "Please, let me talk to him first." Melanie hesitated, every maternal instinct screaming at her to run to her child. But she nodded. Kelvin walked the rest of the way alone, rain soaking through his expensive shirt, through his skin, through every carefully constructed wall he'd built around his heart. Joseph watched him approach with red-rimmed eyes. "How'd you find me?" His voice was hollow. "Your mom figured it out. This is where she told me about you, the first time." Kelvin sat on the swing beside him, chains creaking under his weight. 17 years ago. "Right here." Joseph looked at the ground. "I found an old photo album at Grandma Norma's house last year. There was a picture of Mom here, smiling. She looked happy, really happy." His voice cracked. "I wanted to see where that was." Before everything got complicated, they sat in the rain, father and son, strangers who shared a face. Finally, Joseph spoke. "Why didn't you want me?" 4 words. 4 words that shattered Kelvin Pinto completely. His throat closed. His eyes burned. And for the first time in 17 years, the man who'd built empires, who'd commanded boardrooms, who'd convinced investors to bet billions on his vision, he had no words. "Joseph, everyone keeps saying you didn't know, that Grandma lied, that the messages didn't go through, that it was all a misunderstanding." Joseph's voice rose, pain bleeding through every syllable. "But you knew Mom was pregnant that night. You knew, and you left anyway. So even if you didn't know about me specifically, you knew about the baby. And you still chose your company." He turned to face Kelvin, tears mixing with rain. "So why? Why wasn't I worth staying for?" Kelvin felt something break inside his chest. The truth. The ugly, unvarnished truth he'd spent 17 years running from. "You're right," he whispered. "I did know. That night, when your mom told me she was pregnant, I knew. And I left anyway." Joseph flinched like he'd been struck. "I left because I was terrified, because I was 25 years old and convinced that my company was the only thing that mattered. I'd spent 3 years building it, sleeping 4 hours a night, pitching to investors who laughed in my face, rewriting code until my eyes bled, and I was so close." His voice cracked. "So close to making it real. And then your mom told me about the baby, and all I could think was, this will ruin everything. So I was the problem. No, I was the problem. Kelvin turned to face his son fully, rain streaming down both their faces. I thought success meant money. Power, proving to everyone who doubted me that I was worth something. I thought if I could just build this company, if I could just make it big enough, I'd finally matter. And did you? Joseph's voice was bitter. Did billions of dollars make you matter? Kelvin laughed, broken and raw. No, it made me empty. I built everything I dreamed of, and had no one to share it with. I dated women who wanted the CEO, not the person. I closed deals that made headlines but came home to silent penthouses. I had everything and felt nothing. He paused. Until 3 weeks ago, when a TV producer told me I had a son. Joseph wiped his eyes roughly. So, what now you want to play, Dad? Make up for lost time? Post pictures of us on Instagram so everyone thinks you're a good person? No. Kelvin's voice steadied. I want to earn the right to know you. I want to prove that I'm not the coward who ran away. His voice broke completely. I want to be the father you deserved 17 years ago. Even if it takes the rest of my life to make up for the beginning. The rain pounded down harder. Joseph's shoulders shook. I just wanted to matter to someone, he whispered. I wanted my dad to think I was worth it. And Kelvin Pinto, who'd kept his composure through hostile takeovers, through public scandals, through moments that would have broken lesser men, shattered. You are worth everything, he choked out. Joseph, listen to me. I thought my dreams mattered more than people. I thought success was measured in dollars and headlines and power. I was wrong. God, I was so wrong. He slid off the swing, knelt in the mud in front of his son, rain and tears and 17 years of regret pouring out of him. You are the best thing I never knew I had, and I will spend the rest of my life proving that you matter, that you were always worth staying for. Joseph stared at him, this billionaire kneeling in the mud, completely undone. And something in the boy's face crumbled. He slid off the swing, fell into his father's arms, and sobbed. Kelvin held him like he was the most precious thing in the universe, because he was. They knelt there in the rain, and the mud of father, and the son he'd abandoned, and let 17 years of pain bleed out between them. I'm sorry, Kelvin whispered into Joseph's wet hair. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you grew up without me. I'm sorry I chose wrong, but I'm here now, and if you'll let me, I will never leave again. Joseph's grip tightened. Promise? I promise. Sometimes the moments that heal us are the ones where we finally tell the truth, not the polished version. Not the version that makes us look good, but the raw, messy, painful truth. Kelvin could have made excuses, could have blamed circumstances or timing or anything else, but he owned his failure. And that honest accountability is what Joseph needed to hear. If you've ever waited for someone to finally tell you the truth, you know how powerful that moment is. Share this story if you believe redemption is possible when people are brave enough to be honest. And if you're still with me, if this story is touching something in your heart, subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because this family still has a long road ahead. They stayed there until Joseph's sobs quieted, until the rain began to ease, until Melanie, who'd been watching from a distance with her hand over her mouth, finally approached. She knelt beside them, and Joseph reached for her too. The three of them broken and wet, and finally, in the same place at the same time, held each other in the park where everything had begun and everything had broken. And for the first time in 17 years, they felt like they might be able to heal. Eventually, they moved to a covered bench. Melanie wrapped Joseph in her jacket. Kelvin called the security team to bring dry clothes and blankets. Joseph sat between his parents, the words still strange but starting to feel real, and asked the question that mattered most. Dad? Kelvin's heart squeezed. Every time Joseph called him that, it felt like a gift he hadn't earned yet. Yeah? Joseph's voice was small, uncertain. Will you stay, even when things get hard? Even when it's not convenient? Even when your company needs you, or the press is awful, or I'm difficult? The question hung in the rain-soaked air. Melanie held her breath. Because this was the answer that would define everything. Kelvin looked at his son, this brilliant, broken, brave kid who'd hacked a TV show's system just to find his father, and made the easiest decision of his life. Yes, he said firmly, even when things get hard, especially when things get hard. Joseph, I missed 17 years. I'm not missing another day. Company meetings can wait. Deals can be rescheduled. Headlines fade. But you? He put his hand on Joseph's shoulder. You're my son. And that means you come first. Always. Joseph searched his face for any trace of doubt. Found none. And smiled, small and fragile, but real. Okay, he whispered. Okay. But as the security team arrived with blankets and the rain finally stopped, none of them noticed the photographer hidden in the trees. The one who'd followed Kelvin from Melanie's apartment. The one who'd just captured the entire breakdown on camera. Billionaire CEO, kneeling in the mud, sobbing with his secret son. The photo would be worth a fortune. And by morning, the whole world would see Kelvin Pinto at his most vulnerable, his most human, his most real. The security team had brought Joseph dry clothes and a thermal blanket. He sat in the back of Kelvin's car, wrapped up like a burrito, eyes heavy with exhaustion. The emotional storm had drained him completely. Within minutes, he'd fallen asleep against the window. Melanie stood in the parking lot, arms crossed, watching rain drip from the trees. And Kelvin stood 10 feet away, sensing the confrontation coming like thunder before lightning. Melanie, don't. Her voice was low, controlled, the kind of control that comes right before an explosion. Joseph is safe. That's all that matters right now. So we're going to get him home, and then you're going to leave. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Yes, there is. Kelvin stepped closer, and Melanie's entire body tensed. What happened in that park, what Joseph asked me, those were questions I should have answered 17 years ago. But you didn't. She spun toward him, and everything she'd been holding back came pouring out. You didn't answer them because you weren't there. You weren't there for his first steps or his first word or the night he had pneumonia and I thought I'd lose him. You weren't there when he asked why all his friends had dads and he didn't. You weren't there when he built his first computer at age 12 and had no one to show it to except me. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. You don't get to swoop in now with your security guards and your therapy appointments and your billion-dollar guilt and act like you can fix this. You don't get to fix 17 years with apologies, Kelvin. The words hung between them like shrapnel. Kelvin didn't flinch, didn't defend himself. Just absorbed every bit of her fury like he'd been waiting 17 years to finally take the hit he deserved. You're right, he said quietly. Melanie blinked. She'd expected excuses, justifications, not agreement. I don't get to fix this with apologies. Kelvin continued. Words are cheap. I know that better than anyone. He took another step closer. So let me fix it with actions. Let me show up. Let me be consistent. Let me prove that I'm not the man who ran away. Why should I believe you won't run again? Because I have something now I didn't have then. His voice was raw, honest. A reason to stay that's bigger than any company, any deal, any amount of money. I have a son who deserves better than the coward I was. Melanie's eyes burned with unshed tears. And what about what I deserved? I loved you, Kelvin. I would have built a life with you. We could have figured it out together, but you didn't even give me that chance. I know. You made me feel like I was a burden, like our baby was a mistake. I know. You broke me. Her voice shattered completely. It took me years to put myself back together, years to trust my own judgment again, years to believe I was worth staying for. Kelvin's composure finally cracked. Tears slipped down his face. I know. And I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. I can't undo the damage I caused. I can't give you back those years. But Melanie, his voice dropped to barely a whisper. I can promise you that I will never make Joseph feel the way I made you feel. I will never let him doubt his worth. I will never disappear. She wanted to stay angry. Anger was safe. Anger was armor. But standing in that parking lot, looking at the man who destroyed her 17 years ago now soaking wet, kneeling in metaphorical mud, offering not excuses, but accountability. Something shifted. He's changing you, she said softly. Joseph, I can see it. Kelvin nodded. He's showing me what actually matters. What I should have prioritized all along. He paused. But I need you to know, I'm not asking to be part of your life. I'm not asking for forgiveness or redemption or a second chance with you. I'm asking for the opportunity to be Joseph's father, however that looks. Whatever boundaries you need. The distinction mattered. He wasn't trying to rewrite their history. He was trying to write a new future. He needs you, Melanie admitted, the words tasting strange in her mouth. I've watched him these past few weeks. Even with all the chaos. Even with the media nightmare, he lights up when you call. He checks his phone constantly, hoping you've texted. He wants a relationship with you. And you? What do you want? Melanie looked at the car where Joseph slept peacefully for the first time in days. Her son. Her whole world. The boy who'd hacked a TV show's system because he was so desperate to find his father. I want him to be happy, she said finally. I want him to have the father he deserves. Even if that father is 17 years late. Kelvin's breath hitched. I won't let him down. I swear to you. You'd better not. Her voice hardened. Because if you hurt him, if you make promises you don't keep, if you disappear when things get inconvenient, if you put your company before him, even once, you'll make sure I regret it. I know. No. Melanie stepped closer. Close enough that he could see the steel in her eyes. You'll have to live with the fact that you broke him. And trust me, Kelvin, that's a hell you don't want to visit. He believed her. So here are my rules. Melanie continued. No PR manipulation. Joseph is not a publicity stunt. He's not a redemption arc for your image. He's a kid who deserves privacy and normalcy. Agreed. No disappearing. If you commit to something, you show up. I don't care if there's a board meeting or a merger or the president calling. You show up for your son. Agreed. No half effort. Joseph deserves your full presence. Not the CEO version, not the polished public version. The real you. With all your flaws and fears. Kelvin's voice was steady. Agreed. And one more thing. Melanie's voice softened slightly. You don't get to make decisions about his life without consulting me first. I've been his parent for 17 years. You don't override that. I wouldn't dream of it. Kelvin met her eyes. Melanie, I know I have no right to ask this. But I need you to help me. I don't know how to be a father. I don't know what he needs or how to talk to him or what I'm supposed to do. I'm terrified of screwing this up. The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. This wasn't Kelvin Pinto, the billionaire. This was just Kelvin, scared and uncertain and desperately trying. He needs consistency, she said quietly. He needs to know you're not going anywhere. That's what he's never had, the security of knowing his father chooses him. He'll have it, I promise. They stood in silence, the weight of 17 years finally beginning to ease. Then the car door opened. Joseph stumbled out, blankets still wrapped around him, hair sticking up at odd angles. Why are you guys standing in the rain? His voice was groggy, confused. Melanie and Kelvin exchanged a glance. Just talking, Melanie said gently. Come on, let's get you home. But Joseph didn't move. He looked between them, his mother who'd raised him, his father who was trying to stay, and asked the question that had been building since the moment they found him in that park. Can we try to be a family? The word hung in the air. Family. I don't mean like, Joseph rushed to clarify. I know you guys aren't together. I'm not asking for that. I just mean, can we try to figure out what this looks like? The three of us? In whatever way makes sense? Melanie's throat tightened. She looked at Kelvin, who was staring at Joseph like he'd just offered him the world. I want that, Kelvin said hoarsely. More than anything. They both turned to Melanie. The decision was hers. She could say no, could keep the boundaries rigid, could protect herself from the possibility of Kelvin disappointing them again. Or she could take the risk. For Joseph, we can try, she said finally, but slowly, with clear boundaries. And if at any point it's not working, we adjust, Kelvin finished. No pressure, no expectations, just figuring it out together. Joseph's face split into the first genuine smile Melanie had seen in weeks. Thank you, he whispered, pulling them both into an awkward, blanket-wrapped hug. Melanie let herself lean into it. Let herself imagine just for a moment what it might look like to co-parent with the man who'd once broken her. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't erase the past. But maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from the rubble. They drove Joseph home, in comfortable silence. Melanie tucked him into bed like she had 1,000 times before, kissing his forehead, whispering that she loved him. When she came back to the living room, Kelvin was standing by the door, keys in hand. I should go, he said quietly. Let you both get some rest. Kelvin. He turned. Thank you, Melanie said. For finding him. For saying the right things in that park. For not running. His smile was tired but real. I meant every word. I'm here, for as long as you'll let me be. She nodded. He left. And Melanie stood in her quiet apartment, feeling the strangest sensation. Hope. Fragile. Uncertain, but real. Maybe they could do this. Maybe broken things could be rebuilt into something different, but still whole. Maybe. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. She opened it, and her blood turned to ice. Breaking. Billionaire Kelvin Pinto's emotional breakdown caught on camera. Below the headline, a photo. Kelvin kneeling in the mud. Joseph sobbing in his arms. The most private, vulnerable moment of their lives. Sold to the highest bidder for the world to consume. And somewhere in a penthouse newsroom, an editor smiled. Because this was the story that would break the internet. And Melanie, Kelvin, and Joseph, they were about to learn that privacy was a luxury they no longer had. The photograph went viral within 6 hours. Kelvin Pinto, Forbes's most ruthless CEO of the decade, on his knees in the mud, arms wrapped around a sobbing teenage boy, completely shattered. The headlines wrote themselves. The billionaire's breaking point. Kelvin Pinto's redemption. Viral photo shows CEO's emotional reunion with secret son. From boardroom to breakdown. The human side of tech's titan. By morning, the image had been shared 4 million times. Kelvin's publicist called it a PR nightmare turned miracle. His board called it damaging to shareholder confidence. The internet called it the most human thing Kelvin Pinto has ever done. Kelvin called it none of their business. He'd learned something in that rain-soaked park. He didn't care what the world thought anymore. He only cared about the boy who'd called him dad and meant it. Monday morning, Kelvin canceled 3 board meetings, rescheduled a keynote speech, and delegated a product launch to his VP. Then he showed up at Melanie's apartment at 8 a.m. with coffee and bagels. "What are you doing here?" Melanie asked, still in her pajamas, hair uncombed. Joseph mentioned he had a project due today, thought he might need help. She stared at him. "You're a billionaire CEO. You don't have time for high school projects." "I made time." He held up the coffee. "Can I come in?" She shouldn't have said yes. But Joseph's face, when he saw Kelvin standing in their kitchen hopeful and surprised, and so happy, made her glad she did. "Dad! You came." The word "still" sent a jolt through Kelvin's chest every time. "You said you were stuck on the algorithm for your robotics project. I thought maybe we could work through it together." Joseph's entire face lit up. "Really? You code?" Kelvin smiled. "I built a tech empire. Yeah, kid. I code." Melanie watched them hunched over Joseph's laptop at the kitchen table, speaking a language she didn't understand, APIs and machine learning and recursive functions, and saw something she'd never expected to see. Her son and his father. Actually connecting. Not because cameras were rolling or producers were watching. Just because Kelvin showed up. You know what's beautiful about second chances? They're built on 1,000 tiny moments, not one grand gesture. Kelvin didn't fix everything by kneeling in that park. He fixed it by showing up the next morning with coffee, and the morning after that, and the morning after that. Consistency isn't glamorous. It doesn't go viral, but it's what builds trust, brick by brick. If you've ever watched someone prove themselves through small, steady actions, or if you're trying to prove yourself to someone you hurt, leave a comment telling me about it. And hit that like button if you believe that showing up matters more than showing off. Because this family is about to teach us what real redemption looks like. The bonding happens slowly, in small moments that accumulated, like interest. Wednesday, Kelvin took Joseph to lunch. They sat in a quiet diner, not some fancy restaurant where photographers would find them, and talked about everything. Coding, music, what it was like growing up without a father. What it was like building a company from nothing. "Did you ever want kids?" Joseph asked, picking at his fries. "Before me, I mean." Kelvin considered lying, making it easier. But Joseph deserved honesty. "I never let myself want anything that might slow me down," he admitted. "Kids, marriage, family, those felt like obstacles to success. I was wrong. They're the whole point of success." Joseph absorbed this. "Do you have other kids? Besides me?" "No. Just you." "Good." Joseph's voice was quiet. "I don't know if I could share you. I've waited 17 years. I want my turn. Kelvin's throat tightened. You have me. All of me. For as long as you want. Friday afternoon, Kelvin cleared his entire schedule for Joseph's robotics competition. The event was at the high school gymnasium, folding tables, covered in wires and circuit boards. Teenage engineers explaining their projects to judges. Parents filming on their phones. Kelvin sat in the bleachers next to Melanie, both of them watching Joseph present his autonomous navigation robot to the judges. He's brilliant, Kelvin whispered. How did he learn all this? YouTube tutorials. Library books. Sheer determination. Melanie's voice carried quiet pride. He taught himself because he wanted to understand the world you came from. Guilt flickered across Kelvin's face. Joseph's robot performed flawlessly. The judges awarded him second place. He ran to the bleachers, medal around his neck, grinning so wide it hurt to look at. Did you see? Did you see? You were incredible, Kelvin said, pulling him into a hug. And Joseph hugged back without hesitation. Like it was natural. Like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Later, as they walked to the parking lot, Joseph between his parents, Melanie caught Kelvin's eye over their son's head. He was really here. Really trying. Really staying. Maybe Norma had been wrong. Maybe people could change. That evening, after Joseph went to bed, Kelvin lingered at the door. Can we talk? He asked quietly. Just for a minute. Melanie nodded, stepping onto the apartment building's small balcony. The night air was cool. The city hummed in the distance. Kelvin leaned against the railing, choosing his words carefully. I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the kind I gave you on television or in the heat of the moment. A proper apology for what I did to you 17 years ago. Melanie crossed her arms. Kelvin, please. Let me say this. He turned to face her fully. You deserved better. You deserved a partner who didn't see your pregnancy as an obstacle. You deserved someone who chose you when things got hard. You deserved love that didn't come with conditions. His voice cracked. And Joseph deserved a father who was there from the beginning. Who held him when he cried and taught him to ride a bike and showed up to every school event. I stole that from both of you, and I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. Melanie's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. I needed to hear that, she whispered. 17 years ago, when I was alone and terrified and convinced I'd made a mistake keeping the baby. You didn't make a mistake. Joseph is, Kelvin's voice broke. He's the best thing I never knew I needed. They stood in silence, years of hurt hanging between them. I don't know how to do this, Melanie admitted. How to let you in without letting you hurt us again. How to trust that you won't disappear when your company needs you. How to, she exhaled shakily. How to protect my son from the man who destroyed his mother. You do it by setting boundaries. By holding me accountable. By kicking me out the second I fail. Kelvin stepped closer. Melanie, I know I don't deserve your trust, but I'm asking for the chance to earn it, one day at a time. One kept promise at a time. She searched his face for any hint of the man who'd left her pregnant and alone, found only someone trying desperately to be better. I still care about you, she confessed. The words surprising even herself. I hate that I do. I hate that some part of me still remembers what it felt like to love you. But I'm terrified, Kelvin. Terrified that if I let myself trust you, you'll break me again. Then don't trust me yet, he said softly. Just watch. Watch me show up. Watch me keep my promises. Watch me put Joseph first. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, maybe we can be friends. Co-parents who don't hate each other. People who survived the worst and came out better. The honesty in his voice undid something in her chest. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Over the next 2 weeks, Kelvin proved himself in ways Melanie hadn't expected. He showed up for a dentist appointment when Joseph was nervous about getting a cavity filled, sat in the waiting room reading medical magazines, and drove them home after, stopping for ice cream because, your mouth is numb anyway, might as well enjoy it. He texted Joseph every morning, not generic good morning messages, but actual conversations, memes about coding, questions about his day. Dad jokes so terrible, Joseph groaned, but secretly loved them. He sent Melanie his schedule every week, so she knew when he'd be in town versus traveling. Asked permission before planning anything with Joseph. Deferred to her judgment on everything from curfews to screen time. He was consistent, present, real, and slowly, Agonizingly slowly, the walls Melanie had built began to crack. 3 weeks after the park, Kelvin came over for dinner. Nothing fancy, spaghetti and garlic bread, Joseph's favorite. They ate at the small kitchen table, laughing at Joseph's story about a coding competition gone wrong. And for a moment, it felt almost normal. After Joseph went to finish homework, Melanie and Kelvin cleaned up together, washing dishes side by side in comfortable silence. Their hands brushed, reaching for the same pan. Both froze. The air shifted, 17 years apart, but the electricity was still there, crackling underneath everything else. Kelvin pulled back first. "Sorry, it's fine," Melanie said quickly. Too quickly. But they both felt it. The ghost of what they used to be. The possibility of something different. Kelvin dried his hands, voice careful. "Melanie, I want you to know I'm not here to try to win you back. That's not what this is about. You don't owe me anything. I know. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't wonder." He met her eyes. "What we could have been, if I hadn't been such a coward." Melanie's breath caught. "We can't go backwards," she said softly. "I know. I'm just saying, whatever this becomes, I'm grateful for it. For you letting me try. For giving me a chance to know our son." Our son. The words felt right now, in a way they never had before. Melanie nodded, unable to trust her voice. The next morning, Melanie's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Mrs. Johnson? This is Vanessa Cole from Find Your Father." Melanie's stomach dropped. "I hope you and your family are doing well. I wanted to reach out with an incredible opportunity." Vanessa's voice was pure enthusiasm. "The first episode featuring you, Joseph, and Kelvin broke every ratings record we've ever had. The response has been overwhelming, and we'd love to do a follow-up." "No. Just hear me out. We're proposing a special 1-hour episode, Where Are They Now? We'd film at a location of your choosing. Keep it intimate. Show how the family is healing. America fell in love with your story. They want to know how it ends. It's not ending, we're living it, privately. We're prepared to offer significant compensation, enough to cover Joseph's college education entirely. Plus, it would give you control over your narrative. Otherwise, tabloids will keep inventing stories." Melanie closed her eyes. Money for Joseph's future. A chance to tell their truth instead of having it sold by strangers. But at what cost? "I need to talk to Kelvin and Joseph. Of course, we're hoping for a decision by Friday. The network is very eager." The call ended. Melanie stared at her phone. They'd finally found peace. Finally started healing. And now the world wanted them to perform their redemption on camera. For ratings, for profit, for millions of strangers who felt entitled to their story. The question was simple. Would they sell their privacy for security? Or protect what they'd built and face the tabloids alone? Melanie called a family meeting. That's what she told Joseph and Kelvin, a family meeting. The words felt strange in her mouth, but also right in a way she couldn't quite explain. They gathered in her living room that evening. Joseph on the couch between his parents, a position that had become familiar over the past few weeks. Comfortable, even. "The show called," Melanie said without preamble. "They want to do a follow-up episode, 1 hour. They're offering enough money to pay for Joseph's entire college education." Joseph's eyes widened. That's a lot of money." "It is," Melanie looked at Kelvin. "They want to film our healing journey, show America how we're doing." Kelvin's jaw tightened. "What did you tell them?" "That I needed to talk to you both first," she turned to Joseph. "This affects all of us, so we decide together." Joseph sat back, processing. "What do you think we should do?" "I think," Melanie said carefully, "that we've given them enough. We didn't choose to have our story televised. You applied to a show looking for answers, and that's valid. But everything since then, the photographers, the tabloids, the viral photos, none of that was our choice. The money would help though," Joseph said quietly. "I know college is expensive. I know you've been saving." "We'll figure out college," Melanie interrupted gently. "We always do. The question is this worth it? Is letting cameras into our lives again worth the security?" Joseph looked at Kelvin. "Dad, what do you think?" Kelvin had been silent, letting Melanie lead. But now he leaned forward, hands clasped. "I think your mom's right. I think we've earned the right to heal privately. Not for ratings, not for public consumption, just for us." He paused. "But Joseph, if you want to do it, if you think it would help, or if the money matters that much, I'll support whatever you decide." Joseph sat with that for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "No, I don't want cameras. I don't want producers telling us what to say or how to feel. I just want—" His voice cracked. "I just want us. Whatever that looks like." Melanie felt something loosen in her chest. Relief. Pride. Love so fierce it hurt. She looked at Kelvin and saw the same emotions reflected in his face. "Then it's decided," she said. "I'll call Vanessa tomorrow and tell her no. I'll have my legal team draft a statement," Kelvin added. "Something that asks for privacy and makes it clear we won't be participating in any future media opportunities." Joseph nodded, then hesitated. "Do you think people will be mad? Like, disappointed we're not giving them an ending?" "Probably," Melanie said honestly. "But their disappointment is not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to each other. And isn't that the lesson so many of us learn too late? That we don't owe the world our pain. We don't owe strangers our healing process. We don't owe anyone access to the most vulnerable parts of our lives just because they're curious." Melanie, Kelvin, and Joseph chose themselves, chose privacy over profit, chose healing over headlines. And if you've ever had to make that choice, you know how hard it is. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to protect your peace. And if you're invested in this family's journey, if you want to see them choose happiness, subscribe, because we're about to witness what real family looks like when the cameras finally stop rolling. The next morning, Melanie called Vanessa. "I appreciate the offer, but we're declining. Our family needs privacy right now." Vanessa launched into her pitch, the money, the narrative control, the opportunity, but Melanie cut her off. "The answer is no. Please don't contact us again." She hung up feeling lighter than she had in weeks. Within an hour, Kelvin's publicist released a joint statement. "The Johnson-Pinto family thanks everyone for their support during this time. We ask that our privacy be respected as we navigate this new chapter together. We will not be participating in any further media appearances or interviews. Thank you for understanding." The tabloids called it disappointing. The fans called it understandable. The family called it survival. 2 days later, Joseph went back to school. Melanie had been terrified. The last time he'd walked those halls, he'd been swarmed, filmed, treated like a spectacle. But something had changed. The statement had worked. Or maybe people had simply moved on to the next viral story. Either way, when Joseph walked through the front doors Friday morning, only a handful of students looked his way. One girl, Emma, from his robotics team waved. "Hey, Joseph, you still coming to practice today?" He blinked. That was it? No questions? No cameras? "Yeah," he said, smiling. "Definitely." His history teacher welcomed him back with a quiet nod. His friends treated him, normally teasing him about missing 2 weeks of assignments, asking if he'd finished the new season of their favorite show. By lunch, Joseph realized something profound. Life was returning to normal. Not the old normal, where he was invisible and fatherless, but a new normal where he had answers, had a dad who showed up, and the world had finally stopped watching. He texted Kelvin, "School was actually okay today. People are being normal again." The response came immediately. "Proud of you. Dinner tonight?" Joseph smiled at his phone. Yeah, dinner sounded perfect. That evening, Kelvin arrived at 6 p.m. sharp. He'd started keeping a toothbrush at the apartment, a change of clothes in the closet, little signs of presence that Joseph noticed, and Melanie pretended not to. Over dinner tacos that Joseph insisted on making himself, they talked about everything and nothing. School drama, a coding problem Kelvin was stuck on, plans for the weekend. It felt ordinary. Beautifully, perfectly ordinary. After Joseph went to his room to finish homework, Kelvin helped Melanie clean up. "He seems better," Kelvin observed, drying a plate. "He is. We all are." Melanie rinsed a glass, then paused. "Kelvin, I need to say something." He set down the dish towel, giving her his full attention. "I was wrong about you." The words came slowly, carefully. "Not about what you did 17 years ago that still hurt, but about who you are now. I thought you'd disappear the moment this got hard. I thought the media pressure or the business demands would pull you away. But you stayed. You keep staying. Kelvin's throat tightened. I told you I would. I know. But promises are easy. Actions are what matter. And you've shown up, Kelvin. Consistently. For Joseph. For she hesitated. For me too. You've let me, he said softly. That takes courage. Letting someone who hurt you back into your life, even just as a co-parent, that's brave. They stood in the small kitchen, years of history and hurt slowly transforming into something else. Understanding. Respect. Maybe, someday, friendship. I don't know what we're building here, Melanie admitted. This thing between the three of us. But it feels important. It is important, Kelvin's voice was certain. We're building a family. Not the traditional kind, maybe. But the kind that matters, people who choose each other and show up, and don't give up when things get messy. Melanie nodded, blinking back tears. Thank you, she whispered, for coming back, for trying, for being the father Joseph deserves. Thank you for letting me. You know what takes more strength than staying angry? Letting someone prove they've changed. Melanie could have kept those walls up forever. She had every right to. But she chose to watch, to wait, to let Kelvin earn his place in their lives. And that kind of grace, that willingness to see someone's growth, instead of just their past, that's powerful. If this story is reminding you of your own journey, whether you're the one seeking forgiveness, or the one learning to give it, drop a comment. Let me know where you are in your story, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Because stories like this, stories about real people making hard choices, these are the ones that remind us we're not alone. The following weekend, Norma drove up to visit. Melanie had been dreading this conversation. The lies, the betrayal, the years of misplaced protection. But when Norma walked through the door and saw Joseph, her grandson, smiling and whole and finally at peace, something in her face crumbled. I'm sorry, Norma said, voice breaking. I thought I was protecting you. But I took something from all of you that wasn't mine to take. Joseph crossed to his grandmother, this fierce woman who'd helped raise him, and hugged her. You did protect me, Grandma. You were there every day. You loved me. That matters. Norma cried then deep, shaking sobs that released years of guilt and fear. Melanie joined them, wrapping her arms around both. We're okay, Mom. We're figuring it out. Later, Norma pulled Kelvin aside. If you hurt them again, you'll make me regret being born. I know, Kelvin met her eyes steadily. But I won't. I give you my word. Norma studied him for a long moment, then nodded. See that you don't. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. But it was a start. Over the next month, life settled into a rhythm. Kelvin flew in every weekend. Sometimes he stayed in a hotel. Sometimes when Joseph begged, he crashed on their couch. They did normal family things. Movie nights, grocery shopping, teaching Joseph to drive in empty parking lots while Melanie gripped the door handle, and Kelvin gave surprisingly patient instructions. The media attention faded. A celebrity scandal pulled focus. Then, a political controversy. Then, something else. Their story became old news. And finally they could breathe. One evening, 6 weeks after the park, Joseph gathered his parents in the living room. I need to ask you something, he said nervously. Melanie and Kelvin exchanged glances. What is it, sweetheart? Joseph looked between them, his mother, who'd sacrificed everything, his father, who was learning how to stay. Can we try to be a real family? The question hung in the air. Melanie's breath caught. Joseph, I know it's complicated. I know you guys have history and hurt, and it's not simple. But, his voice cracked. We're already doing family things. We already eat dinner together, and text each other, and show up for each other. So, why can't we call it what it is? Melanie's hands trembled. Fear whispered, he'll leave. He'll disappoint you. He'll prove Norma right. But love answered, he's trying. He's here. He's choosing us. She looked at Kelvin, who sat perfectly still, barely breathing, waiting for her decision. Not pushing, not demanding. Just waiting. Hoping. Joseph reached out, placing his hand palm up on the coffee table. An invitation. Kelvin slowly placed his hand over Joseph's. They both looked at Melanie. Her eyes burned with tears, fear, and hope, and love, all tangled together. She thought of 17 years alone. Of the nights she cried herself to sleep. Of the promises Kelvin broke, and the ones he was keeping. of the boy between them who deserved parents who tried. Slowly, she reached out, placed her hand over both of theirs. "We'll try," she whispered. Together. Joseph's face broke into the most beautiful smile. Kelvin's eyes glistened with tears. And Melanie felt something she hadn't felt in 17 years. Whole. 6 months later, Joseph's robotics team won the state championship. The entire family was there. Melanie, Kelvin, and even Norma, who'd driven 3 hours to watch her grandson accept the trophy. When Joseph's name was called, he looked into the stands, found his parents sitting side by side, both cheering, both crying, both there. After, they went for ice cream, laughed about Joseph's victory speech, made plans for the summer, and walked to their cars like any other family on a Friday night. Unremarkable. Normal. Perfect. That night, Melanie stood on her balcony, watching the city lights. Kelvin joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Just thinking about how different things are now, how we got here." "Took the long way," Kelvin said with a rueful smile. "Yeah, but maybe that's okay. Maybe we needed the detour to become the people who could actually make this work." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it? Any of it?" Melanie considered. "I regret the pain, the years Joseph didn't have a father, the way we hurt each other. But I don't regret Joseph. And I don't regret this, what we're building now." "Me neither." They stood in comfortable silence. 2 people who'd loved and lost and found each other again in the most unexpected way. Not as lovers, but as partners, co-parents. Maybe, someday, friends who'd survived the worst and came out stronger. "Thank you," Kelvin said quietly, "for giving me a second chance. Thank you for earning it." Inside, Joseph was laughing at something on his phone. Their son, the bridge between them, the reason they'd both learned to be better. The past had broken them, but the future, this fragile, breathtaking future, was theirs to build together. Not on camera, not for ratings, not for anyone's approval, but their own. Just 3 people who chose each other, again and again and again. And if this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that families come in all forms and second chances are real when people do the work, please share this video. Someone in your life needs to hear this message today. Subscribe so you never miss stories about real people, real struggles, and real redemption. Drop a comment telling me what family means to you. And remember, it's never too late to choose the people who matter. It's never too late to come home. That was enough. That was everything. That was family.